I've always loved coffee. Not just drinking it but everything about it. The smell of fresh beans, the precise temperature of steamed milk, the art of a perfectly poured latte. When I was 16 I got my first job at a small coffee shop downtown and something just clicked. While my older brother Marcus was playing football and planning his business degree, I was learning about espresso extraction times and customer service. Marcus never understood it. Even back then he'd pick me up after my shifts and wrinkle his nose. "You smell like burnt coffee," he'd say. "When are you going to get a real job?" I just smiled and kept working. That was 12 years ago. I'm 28 now and to my family I'm still just the barista. Marcus became a mid-level marketing manager at a tech company. He makes decent money, drives a nice car and never lets anyone forget it. My parents beam with pride whenever he talks about his quarterly reviews and his team of 3 people. Me. I still work behind a coffee bar. I show up at 5 a.m., I make drinks, I chat with customers. My clothes smell like espresso beans and I have permanent calluses on my hands from tamping grounds. To my family, I'm the one who never quite lived up to my potential. What they don't know is that I own the shop. And 42 others just like it. The first shop I bought was the one where I started working at 16. By the time I was 21, I'd worked my way up to manager. The owner, Maria, was getting older and wanted to retire. She offered to sell it to me for $180,000. I'd been saving every penny, working 80-hour weeks, learning everything I could about the business. I took out loans, maxed out my credit and bought it. My family thought I was insane. "You're going into debt for a coffee shop?" Marcus had laughed. "Do you know how many of those fail in the first year?" But it didn't fail. I knew that neighborhood, knew the customers, knew exactly what worked. Within 2 years I'd paid off the loans and opened a second location. Then a third. I kept my ownership quiet, kept working behind the bar, kept learning. While Marcus was climbing the corporate ladder one rung at a time, I was building an empire one espresso at a time. By 25 I had 15 locations. By 27, 38. Now at 28 I have 43 coffee shops across the state, with plans to expand nationally. The company is valued at just over $50 million. I have 270 employees, a corporate office downtown, and meetings with investors twice a month. But when I go home for family dinners, I'm still just the barista who couldn't make something of herself. My birthday dinner was at Marcelli's, the Italian place downtown where my family goes for special occasions. It's expensive enough that my parents feel fancy but not so expensive that they complain about the bill. Marcus had insisted on picking the restaurant this year, probably because his boss occasionally eats there. I arrived straight from work, still in my jeans and the simple black shirt I wear behind the bar. My hair was in a ponytail and I probably smelled like coffee. Marcus was already there in his suit showing my parents something on his phone. Probably sales figures or team metrics or whatever he uses to remind everyone how successful he is. There she is. Mom said, standing to hug me. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." "Still coming straight from work?" Marcus asked, looking me up and down. "You know they have these things called days off, right?" "I like staying busy," I said, taking my seat. Dad poured me water from the bottle on the table. "How's the coffee shop treating you?" "It's good. Busy season with the weather getting colder." "Still making lattes?" Marcus asked, that familiar condescending smile on his face. He said it loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. "Maybe management one day, huh?" The server arrived before I could respond, which was probably for the best. We ordered. Marcus got the most expensive thing on the menu, making a point to say he'd had it before and it was exceptional, and fell into the usual rhythm of family dinner conversation. Marcus talked about his work. He had 3 people reporting to him now, might be 4 soon. There was talk of a promotion, though there'd been talk of that promotion for 18 months. His boss, Richard, was really impressed with his latest campaign. The company was doing well. Marcus was doing well. Everything was always going well for Marcus. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said. "You've worked so hard." "It's all about strategy," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. "Knowing how to position yourself, how to add value, how to make yourself indispensable. That's what separates the successful people from—" He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Well, from everyone else." "Marcus," Dad said, but without much force behind it. "What?" "I'm just saying there's a difference between a job and a career. Some people are content just clocking in and clocking out, and that's fine, I guess. But if you want to actually build something, you need ambition. I took a sip of water. I have ambition. Sure, but aim higher, you know? You're smart enough. You could do something with your life if you really tried. Get an MBA, work for a real company, climb the ladder. Instead you're... He waved his hand. Making coffee drinks. Someone has to make them, I said calmly. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be you. You're almost 30. Don't you want something more? The server brought our appetizers. I focused on my bruschetta while Marcus continued his lecture about career trajectories and professional development. My parents nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with what I assumed was meant to be encouraging sympathy. This was normal. This was every family dinner, every holiday, every gathering. Marcus was the success story and I was the cautionary tale. The one who took the safe route, the easy route, the route without ambition or vision. They had no idea that I'd built something most people only dream about. They had no idea that while Marcus was in meetings about meetings, I was making decisions that affected nearly 300 people's livelihoods. And I'd never told them. At first it was because I wanted to prove it could work before I said anything. Then it was because I wanted to see how big I could grow it. Now it was almost funny watching them make assumptions while having no idea what my life actually looked like. You know what your problem is? Marcus said, pointing at me with his fork. You're too comfortable. You found something easy and you're just coasting. That's why you'll never have what I have. What do you have? I asked. He blinked. What? What do you have that I should want? Are you serious? A career. A real career with growth potential and prestige and... You manage 3 people and answer to 7 managers above you, I said. You can't make a decision without 4 approval layers. You work 60 hours a week to make someone else rich. So what exactly do you have that I don't? His face flushed. I have a future. I have prospects. I'm building towards something. You're 30 years old making minimum wage. I don't make minimum wage. Whatever you make, it's not a career. It's a job. There's a difference. You're right, I said. There is a difference. Mom reached over and patted my hand. Honey, Marcus is just trying to help. We all just want to see you succeed. I am succeeding. Of course you are, sweetheart, she said in that tone that meant she didn't believe it at all. And we're proud of you. But Marcus has a point about ambition. It's not too late to go back to school, get some real credentials, maybe work your way into management somewhere. Don't you want to have something to show for all these years? I was about to respond when I saw him walk through the door. Richard Morrison, Marcus's boss. Tall, 50s, expensive suit, the kind of confident walk that comes from never having to prove yourself to anyone. He was scanning the restaurant, clearly meeting someone. And then he saw me. His face lit up with recognition. He changed direction, heading straight for our table. Marcus was mid-sentence, something about quarterly projections, when Richard appeared beside us. Emma. Richard said warmly. I thought that was you. I didn't know you came here. Marcus's words died in his throat. He looked between me and his boss, confused. Hi, Richard, I said casually. Just having dinner with my family. This is my brother Marcus. I think you two know each other, and my parents. Of course. Marcus, good to see you outside the office. Richard shook Marcus's hand, but his attention was on me. Emma, I wanted to thank you again for that conversation we had last month. Your insights on the retail coffee market were invaluable. Really helped us refine our positioning strategy. Marcus's face was frozen in a confused smile. You know each other? Know each other? Richard laughed. Emma's one of the smartest business owners I've ever met. I tried to convince her to consult for us full-time, but she's too busy running her empire. He turned back to me. How many locations are you up to now? 43. The table had gone completely silent. My parents were staring. Marcus's mouth was slightly open. 43 as of last week, I confirmed. Opening number 44 in Riverside next month. Incredible, Richard said, shaking his head. You know, Marcus, your sister is exactly the kind of entrepreneur we try to learn from. Built a $50 million company from the ground up, completely bootstrapped before she was 30. That's the kind of vision and execution most people never achieve. Marcus made a sound that might have been words. Anyway, I don't want to interrupt your dinner, Richard continued. But Emma, let's schedule that lunch meeting we talked about. I'd love to pick your brain about expansion strategies. He pulled out his phone. Are you free next Tuesday? I'll have my assistant check my calendar and send you some options, I said. Perfect. Wonderful to see you all. Marcus, see you Monday. Richard nodded to my parents and walked toward his own table. For a long moment nobody moved. The silence was deafening. My mom's fork was suspended halfway to her mouth. Dad was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Marcus looked like he was trying to solve a complicated math problem in his head and failing. You. Marcus started, then stopped. That was my boss. I know. He said. Did he say $50 million? The company's valued at about $52 million actually, but who's counting? But you. Mom's voice was faint. You work at a coffee shop. I own 43 coffee shops, Mom. I also work at them because I like staying connected to the actual business. It's important to understand what's happening on the ground level, not just in a corporate office. You own. Dad couldn't seem to finish sentences. Since when? I bought my first shop 7 years ago. The one where I started working. Maria wanted to retire and I had saved enough for a down payment. Grew from there. Marcus was shaking his head. That's not possible. You never said anything. You never asked, I said simply. You assumed that because I work behind a counter that's all I am. All of you did. But you always said you worked at a coffee shop, Mom protested. I do work at a coffee shop. Several of them. I also own them. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Richard Morrison knows who you are, Marcus said, and he sounded almost dazed. My boss knows who you are. He asked you for business advice. He's asked me several times actually. I consulted on their retail strategy last quarter. Nice guy. The server appeared with our entrees, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated at the table. She set down plates, asked if we needed anything else and left. Nobody touched their food. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked, and for the first time she didn't sound condescending or pitying. She sounded hurt. I considered my answer carefully. At first I didn't tell you because I wanted to make sure it would actually work. Starting a business is risky and I didn't want to announce something just to fail publicly. Then I didn't tell you because I was busy actually running the business. And then I paused. Then I realized that you'd all decided who I was without ever asking. And I wanted to see how long it would take for you to question your assumptions. That's not fair, Marcus said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. You let us think. I let you think exactly what you wanted to think. I never lied. I told you I worked at coffee shops. I told you I was busy. I told you I liked what I did. You're the ones who decided that meant I was going nowhere. Dad cleared his throat. Sweetheart, we never thought you were going nowhere. Yes, you did. Every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call. Marcus's career, Marcus's promotions, Marcus's ambitions. Me. The barista who couldn't get her life together. The one who needed to aim higher, try harder, be more ambitious. I didn't mean it like that, Marcus said quietly. How did you mean it? He didn't have an answer. Mom had tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. We just wanted you to be happy, to be successful. I am successful, Mom. I have 43 thriving businesses. I employ 270 people. I'm expanding nationally. I built something from nothing and I did it while you all assumed I was wasting my life. The entrees were getting cold. Nobody was eating. Finally, Dad picked up his fork. Tell us about it, he said. Tell us how you did it. So I did. I told them about buying the first shop, about the loans and the risk in the 80-hour weeks. I told them about learning every aspect of the business, from supply chain management to real estate negotiations to employee retention strategies. I told them about the second location, the third, the decision to develop a consistent brand instead of keeping them all independent. I told them about the corporate office I opened 2 years ago, about my executive team, about the expansion plans. They listened in silence. Marcus's food remained untouched on his plate. By the time I finished, my own dinner was cold. Why did you keep working behind the counter? Mom asked. If you own all of this, why not just manage from an office? Because I never want to forget where I started. The minute I stop understanding what my employees go through every day, the minute I stop knowing my customers personally, that's when I stop being good at this. Besides, I love it. I love making coffee, I love the regularity of opening the shop at 5 a.m. I love seeing the same faces every morning. That's not something to be ashamed of. We never said it was something to be ashamed of, Dad said, but even he didn't sound convinced. You just thought it was something I should move past, I said. Something I should grow out of. A stepping stone to something better, not a foundation to build on. Marcus finally spoke. Richard Morrison asked you for business advice. He did. My boss thinks you're. He trailed off. More successful than you? I offered. He does. Because I am. Not because your success doesn't matter, Marcus, but because you spent so much time comparing our careers that you never actually looked at what mine was. You assumed making coffee was less important than managing a marketing team. Maybe it is to you. But I built something. Something real, something lasting, something that's mine. The server returned, concerned about our untouched food. We assured her everything was fine, just got caught up in conversation. She offered to box things up. We accepted. The drive home was quiet. We'd agreed to postpone birthday cake for another night, nobody having much appetite after that dinner. Mom had hugged me tight in the parking lot, crying a little, apologizing. Dad kept saying he was proud of me, that he'd always been proud, though we both knew that wasn't quite true. Marcus walked me to my car. For once he wasn't wearing his usual confident smirk. I'm an asshole, he said finally. You're my brother. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, he said, echoing my earlier words. I really thought you were just coasting. That you'd given up. I know. Does Richard really ask you for advice? He does. So do a lot of people. Turns out building a multimillion-dollar company from scratch teaches you some things. He nodded slowly. I have 3 people on my team. 3. And I thought that made me something special. It does make you something special. Managing people is hard. But it's not more special than what I do. It's just different. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. For every shitty comment, every time I made you feel small, every assumption I made. I'm really genuinely sorry. I know you are. Are we okay? I thought about it. We will be. Eventually. But Marcus, you need to understand something. You didn't just make me feel small about my work. You made me feel small about my choices, my life, my priorities. And you did it constantly, confidently, like you had all the answers and I had none. That doesn't go away with one apology. He nodded, looking more subdued than I'd ever seen him. I get it. I do. And I'll do better. I promise. I hope so. I drove home to my apartment. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, just a nice 2-bedroom with a view of downtown. I could afford more, could afford much more, but I'd never seen the point. The money from the business goes back into the business, into expansion, into employee benefits and training programs and quality improvements. I pay myself a salary that's comfortable but not excessive. I don't need a sports car or a designer wardrobe to prove my worth. That night I got a text from Marcus. For what it's worth, I looked up your company. The reviews are incredible. Your employees love working for you. And the coffee really is the best in the city. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I texted back, thanks. And Marcus? You're good at your job too. You don't have to be me to be successful. You just have to be you. The next morning I was back at my original location at 5 a.m., opening up, starting the espresso machine, arranging pastries in the case. My store manager, Jennifer, arrived at 5:30. How was the birthday dinner? She asked. Interesting, I said. My brother found out what I actually do for a living. Oh no. How'd that go? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of shocked silence and awkward apologies. She laughed. At least it's out there now. No more pretending to be just a barista. I'm not pretending, I said, pulling a perfect shot of espresso. I am a barista. I'm just also a sous. Both things are true. Fair point. Speaking of which, the contractors called about the Riverside location. They're ahead of schedule. Perfect. Make sure we're ready for the hiring fair next week. I want to be fully staffed before we open. We fell into our morning routine, the familiar rhythm of opening a coffee shop. Customers started arriving at 6 a.m., the usual crowd of early risers and commuters. I made drinks, took orders, chatted with regulars. At 8 a.m. I had a video call with my executive team about the expansion timeline. At 10 a.m. I was back behind the bar. At noon I had lunch with a potential investor. At 2 p.m. I was training a new employee on latte art. This was my life. Not just one thing or the other, but all of it together. The coffee and the The early mornings and the board meetings, the calluses on my hands and the corporate strategy sessions. I'd never wanted to choose between loving the work and building an empire. I'd wanted both, and I'd found a way to have both. My phone buzzed with an email from Richard Morrison's assistant, confirming our lunch meeting for Tuesday. Below that was a text from Mom asking if we could have birthday cake this weekend, maybe at my place this time. She'd like to see where I live. I smiled and got back to work. There were still 3 hours left in my shift and a line was forming at the counter. The espresso machine needed refilling, someone had spilled cream near the sugar station, and a regular was waiting for his usual order. I was a barista. I was a CEO. I was exactly where I wanted to be. And I made damn good coffee. I stared at my phone, rereading Mom's text for the 3rd time. Cleaned out the garage today. Sold those paintings you left here. Got $8,000. You're welcome. No question mark. No, is that okay? Just a statement of fact, like she'd thrown out old magazines. Those weren't just paintings. They were evidence. Court-ordered protected assets from a federal art fraud case I'd been working on for 18 months. Every piece cataloged, photographed, and legally frozen pending trial. And Mom had just sold them to some random buyer for a fraction of their actual value. I should explain how I ended up storing $1.2 million in evidence at my mother's house. It wasn't my first choice. 3 years ago, I graduated with a degree in art history that my family had openly mocked. "You're going to work at a museum gift shop," Dad had said at my graduation dinner, refusing to even come to the ceremony. "Should have gone to business school like your sister." What they didn't know was that I'd been recruited straight out of grad school by the FBI's art crime team. My thesis on authentication techniques for mid-century American painters had caught someone's attention. 6 months of training later, I was working undercover operations to recover stolen and forged artwork. The case that led to those paintings in Mom's garage started when a wealthy collector named Richard Brennan contacted our office. He'd purchased what he believed was an original Edward Hopper painting for $2.3 million. Authentication later revealed it was an extremely sophisticated forgery. Not just one painting. Brennan had bought 17 pieces over 5 years, all fake, totaling over $40 million in fraudulent sales. The investigation led us to a network of forgers, dealers, and authenticators running one of the largest art fraud schemes in decades. We'd seized hundreds of pieces as evidence, including the 17 paintings Brennan had purchased. Those specific 17 needed to be stored outside our normal evidence facility due to space constraints and climate control requirements while we prepared for trial. Standard procedure allowed temporary evidence storage at secure, climate-controlled locations with proper documentation. Mom's house, with its finished basement and dehumidifier system, technically qualified. I'd filed all the paperwork, gotten approval, installed security cameras, and specifically told Mom these were work items that couldn't be touched. "They're just paintings," she'd said when I brought them over. "Why do you need my basement?" "Storage space," I'd replied. "Please don't move them. They're cataloged for a work project." She'd rolled her eyes. Always so dramatic about everything. That was 14 months ago. I'd checked on them regularly, documented their condition, maintained the chain of custody logs. Everything by the book. Until today. I called Mom immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding annoyed. "What?" "The paintings," I said carefully. "You sold them." "Yes, I told you in the text. Some art dealer came to the estate sale I organized. Gave me $8,000 cash for all of them. I used it to remodel the powder room. You should see the new tile." "Mom, those paintings weren't yours to sell." "Oh please. You abandoned them in my basement for over a year. I needed the space. Your sister is storing her holiday decorations down there now." My sister's voice came through in the background. "Is that her? Tell her she should be grateful you got anything for those ugly things." I closed my eyes, forcing calm into my voice. "Who did you sell them to?" "Some dealer. Martin something. He had a card. Very professional. He said they were worth about $10,000 but he'd give me $8,000 cash on the spot. I negotiated well. $10,000. For 17 paintings that were evidence in a $40 million fraud case. Paintings that, even as forgeries, were worth over $1.2 million due to their quality and evidentiary value. "Mom, I need that dealer's contact information. Right now." "Why?" "The sale is final. Cash transaction. He took them yesterday. Which paintings specifically? All of them. All those depressing American things. Diners and gas stations and lonely people. Honestly, I don't know why you even liked them. All 17. The entire evidence collection for the Brennan case. Gone. I'll be there in an hour, I said. Don't touch anything else in that basement. Excuse me? This is my house. I'll touch whatever I want. And I'm busy today. Your sister and I are going to lunch. The line went dead. I sat in my car for a moment considering my options. Then I called my supervisor, Special Agent Linda Martinez. We have a problem, I said. An hour later, I stood in my mother's driveway as she glared at me from the front door. I can't believe you're making such a fuss about this, she said, arms crossed. They were just paintings. My sister Rachel stood beside her, equally annoyed. Seriously, you left them here for over a year. Mom had every right to clear out her space. They weren't mine to leave, I said evenly. They were federal evidence. Mom laughed. Federal evidence? You work at some gallery doing appraisals or something. Don't be so dramatic. I'm an FBI agent, Mom. Art crime team. Those paintings were evidence in an active federal case. You just sold protected assets. Rachel snorted. FBI agent? Please. You have a degree in art history. You probably work in a museum basement cataloging donations. I've been with the Bureau for 3 years. Those 17 paintings were forged pieces worth over $1.2 million as evidence. They were under court protection order. Sealed in a federal case. Then why were they in my basement? Mom demanded. Temporary evidence storage. I had authorization. I filed all the paperwork. I told you not to touch them. You said they were for a work project. You didn't say they were evidence in some case. I couldn't disclose case details. But I explicitly told you they couldn't be moved or sold. Rachel stepped forward. Even if that's true, which I doubt, how are we supposed to know? You never tell us anything about your life. You're barely part of this family. That stung, but I kept my focus. I need the dealer's information. Now. Mom disappeared inside and returned with a business card. Martin Voss. State Acquisitions. He seemed very legitimate. I photographed the card and immediately texted it to Martinez. Within seconds my phone rang. We know Voss, Martinez said. He's on our watch list. Connected to the same fraud network we're investigating. If he has those paintings, he knows exactly what they are. What do we do? I'm sending a team. We need to secure your mother's house as a crime scene and get statements. This is now obstruction of justice and theft of federal evidence. She didn't know. Doesn't matter. The asset seizure was legally documented. Your mother signed acknowledgement of temporary federal storage when you brought them there. Remember? I did remember. The form she'd signed without reading, waving it off as government paperwork nonsense. How long until the team arrives? I asked. 20 minutes. Keep everyone there. I hung up and turned to Mom and Rachel. Federal agents are coming. You'll both need to give statements. Mom's face went pale. Agents? Here. What are you talking about? You sold federal evidence. There are going to be consequences. This is ridiculous, Rachel said. You're overreacting because Mom cleaned out some junk. They weren't junk. They were authenticated forgeries in a major fraud case. Each one documented, photographed, and legally protected. The buyer you sold them to is connected to the criminal network we're investigating. Mom's hand went to her throat. Criminal network? It was just an estate dealer. Who specifically targeted this house because he knew exactly what was in your basement. Those paintings are evidence against some very wealthy, very connected people. People who would pay a lot to make that evidence disappear. The color drained from Mom's face. I didn't know. You didn't ask. You just sold them. Rachel's confidence wavered. But Mom got cash. A legitimate sale. There's nothing legitimate about selling federal evidence. Even unknowingly. 20 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up. 6 agents emerged, including Martinez and 2 U.S. Marshals. Mom grabbed my arm. What's happening? Why are there marshals? Asset seizure and recovery, I said quietly. They need to secure the scene and document everything. Martinez approached, her expression professional but sympathetic. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Special Agent Martinez. We need to discuss the 17 paintings you sold yesterday. I didn't know they were important. You signed a federal storage agreement 14 months ago acknowledging that these items were protected assets under FBI custody. Do you remember signing that document? Mom's face crumpled. I don't. There was a form. A form explicitly stating that the items in your basement were federal property, not to be moved, sold, or altered without authorization from Special Agent Patterson or the FBI art crime team. Rachel stepped forward. My mother made an honest mistake, which has now resulted in the disappearance of over $1.2 million in federal evidence. The paintings are gone, the buyer has disappeared, and we have a major case potentially compromised. One of the marshals held up a document. We have a warrant to search the premises and seize any remaining evidence related to the missing paintings. Mom started crying. I just wanted to remodel my bathroom. Over the next 4 hours, agents photographed Mom's basement, interviewed both her and Rachel, and traced the cash transaction. The powder room remodel contractor was contacted. The $8,000 cash had already been spent. Deposit on tile work, new fixtures, labor. Martinez pulled me aside. Faucets in the wind. Used a burner phone for the contact. Paid cash. Disappeared. The paintings. Likely already moved out of state. Maybe out of the country. These forgeries are so good they could be sold as originals if the buyer doesn't know the authentication history. So the case. Severely compromised. We have photographs and documentation, but physical evidence is crucial for trial. The defense will argue chain of custody was broken. They'll claim the paintings could have been swapped, altered, anything. We might lose the entire case. I felt sick. 18 months of work. Dozens of victims. Millions in fraud. All potentially gone because Mom wanted new bathroom tile. What happens to my mother? I asked. Martinez's expression softened slightly. That's up to the U.S. attorney. She signed the storage agreement. She sold protected federal assets. Even without criminal intent, there are consequences. 3 days later, Mom and Rachel sat across from me in a conference room at the FBI field office. A federal prosecutor, 2 agents, and a representative from the U.S. Marshals Service were present. The prosecutor, a woman named Sarah Chin, laid out the situation with clinical precision. Mrs. Patterson, you sold 17 pieces of evidence in an active federal fraud investigation. These paintings were valued at $1.2 million for evidentiary purposes. You received $8,000. The current location of these paintings is unknown. Mom's hands shook. I made a mistake. A mistake with significant consequences. The investigation you compromised involves $40 million in fraud affecting 63 victims. Without that physical evidence, our case is substantially weakened. What does that mean? Rachel asked. It means the people who ran this fraud scheme might walk free. It means victims might not get restitution. It means years of investigative work could be lost. Chin slid papers across the table. These are your options. Option 1. We charge you with theft of federal property, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. Maximum sentence of 10 years federal prison and $250,000 in fines. Mom gasped. Rachel went white. Option 2. You cooperate fully. You help us trace the sale, identify the buyer, provide any information that might help us recover the paintings. You pay restitution for the investigative costs incurred. Approximately $85,000. You accept a plea agreement to a reduced charge with probation and community service. $85,000? Mom whispered. That covers the cost of re-authenticating backup evidence, expert witness fees, additional investigative hours, and court costs related to this compromise. It doesn't cover the value of the paintings themselves. That would be $1.2 million. I don't have $85,000. Then we proceed with option 1. Federal charges. Trial. Likely conviction given the signed storage agreement and documented sale. Rachel leaned forward. This is insane. She didn't know. She signed a federal document. She accepted responsibility for protected assets. Ignorance isn't a defense when you sign government paperwork. Chen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood. Excuse me for a moment. She left the room. Martinez leaned toward me. The recovery team found something, she said quietly. 5 minutes later, Chin returned, her expression unchanged. The paintings have been located. An anonymous tip led us to a storage unit in Newark. All 17 pieces undamaged. Mom sobbed with relief. Rachel grabbed her hand. However, Chin continued, this doesn't change the fundamental issue. You sold federal evidence. The paintings were recovered, but only through significant additional resources and luck. The buyer is still unknown. The network is still active. So what happens now? I asked. Reduced charges. Mrs. Patterson, you'll plead guilty to mishandling federal property. Sentence will be 2 years probation, 200 hours community service and $25,000 restitution for recovery costs. You'll also be permanently barred from serving as storage for any federal assets. Mom nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, I'll do that. Your daughter Rachel will face no charges as she wasn't party to the original storage agreement. However, both of you will be required to testify if this case goes to trial about how the sale occurred. Rachel slumped in her chair, relief evident. Chin gathered her papers. Sign the plea agreement. Report to probation within 10 days. The $25,000 is due in 60 days or payment arrangements must be made. Understood. Understood, Mom whispered. 2 weeks later, I sat in Mom's kitchen as she signed the payment plan paperwork for her restitution. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I really didn't know. You didn't read the form you signed. You didn't listen when I said not to touch them. You just did what you wanted. I know. I thought you were being dramatic about work stuff. I didn't think you actually had an important job. That hurt more than the painting disaster. You never believed I could do anything important. Mom set down the pen. That's not true. Yes, it is. You and Rachel have always treated me like the family failure because I studied art instead of business. You've never asked about my work. Never cared what I actually do. Because you never told us. I couldn't tell you classified details. But I told you I work for the FBI. You just didn't believe me. Rachel entered the kitchen, stopping when she saw us. Is this a bad time? We're finishing the restitution paperwork, Mom said. Rachel sat down, unusually quiet. Finally, I Googled you. I looked at her. What? Your FBI profile. It's public record for agents who testify in court. You've worked on 15 major cases. Recovered over $60 million in stolen art. Testified as an expert witness 9 times. You're actually really good at your job. Surprising. Yeah, actually, I thought you were doing appraisals at some small gallery. I had no idea you were tracking international art theft and fraud. You never asked. Rachel flinched. I know. I'm sorry. We've been really dismissive of you. Mom nodded. Have. And it almost cost you your career and me my freedom. The case is still solid, I said. The paintings are back. We've actually identified the buyer through forensic analysis of the storage unit. It's led to 3 new arrests. So it worked out? Mom asked hopefully. Not because of luck. Because of dozens of agents working overtime to fix a problem that shouldn't have existed. You cost the Bureau about $100,000 in resources. The $25,000 restitution doesn't cover that. Mom's face fell. I'll pay whatever. You can't. You don't have it. So the taxpayers cover the difference because you sold evidence for bathroom tile. The silence stretched long. Finally Rachel spoke. What can we do to make this right? Read what you sign. Listen when someone tells you something is important. Stop assuming I'm incompetent just because my career doesn't look like yours. That's fair, Mom said quietly. I stood to leave. Rachel followed me to the door. Are we okay? She asked. You and me. Eventually. But you spent years calling me the family embarrassment while I was literally catching criminals. That's going to take time to get past. I know. I'm sorry. Really? I nodded and left. 6 months later, the art fraud case went to trial. With all 17 paintings authenticated and presented as evidence, the jury convicted Richard Brennan's dealer and 2 associates on all counts. Total sentences, 47 years. Restitution, $43 million. Mom attended the trial sitting in the public gallery. Afterward she waited by my car. I watched you testify, she said. You were impressive, confident, professional. Nothing like how I thought of you. Because you never really looked. I know. And I'm sorry. I've spent 6 months thinking about how badly I misjudged you. How much I didn't know about your life because I never bothered to ask. You thought art history was a joke degree. It is when I don't understand what you do with it. But you use it to catch criminals and help victims get justice. That's not a joke. That's important work. I softened slightly. Thanks. Rachel and I want to take you to dinner. A real one. Where we actually ask you about your life and listen to the answers. I'd like that. And I finished paying the restitution. All $25,000. I sold some jewelry and took an extra shift at the hospital. It's done. That's good, Mom. I learned my lesson. Read everything before signing. Don't sell things that aren't mine. Respect my daughter's career even if I don't fully understand it. I smiled. Those are good lessons. She hugged me and I let her. But I never stored evidence at her house again.